Hey gang, welcome to a super sweaty live stream from my COVID bunker. Today was hot and then it's not, but the roof heats up and it just gets to be 1,000,000 degrees here, so if it's noisy, I'm sorry. I have these like 2 fans going to try to make the room somewhat livable. While I go over with you today something I thought was super important. I wanted to do an episode on Vulcan, and I wanted to say something about John Prine, and talk about God and all these things, and go through a box of stuff I found, but I don't know, guys. Today was hard for losing stuff. So I'm just going to let that mull over for a little bit before I get into that. And instead, I'm going to briefly jump into something that I've been talking to my kids a lot about, because of their like online consumption of things while we're in this kind of like situation. My daughter loves TikTok, like all budding teens and near teens do, and so what that results in is her watching tons of like TikTok compilations on YouTube, and that's fine. For the most part, I think a lot of those things are funny as long as they're age appropriate. But what kills me is when she'll start to watch the ones of like people doing art. I should be like, oh my god, isn't it great? Dad, isn't this like great art? Aren't these people like fantastic artists? And they're not bad. Oh, it's starting to pour rain now. I don't know if you guys can hear that, or if it's screwing up my ability to stream even further, but whatever. We'll do it anyways. We gotta do it again. We'll do it again. But she'll be watching these things. She'll be like, "Isn't these people great artists?" And a lot of these people are very technically proficient. They have done a thing which is pretty amazing, and one of the like great benefits of technology in that they've watched a lot of online tutorials for how to do things and how to make things, and so they're very proficient at painting a photograph or a person or eyes or replicating a photograph, especially. Some of them do it in graphite, some of them do it in paint, and it's cool. But again, it's not really what I consider art. And to not shit on everything, and to not be that dad who goes, "You like this, kids? It's gross, it sucks." I decided instead to teach my kids something that a really wonderful professor of mine at UT taught me 1,000,000 years ago. God, probably 17 years ago. That stuck with me, and it's how I evaluate a lot of things in art, film, I mean, you name it. And it's a simple evaluation criteria that can be applied to a lot of things. Again, beyond just art, life, whatever, live streams, you name it. So we're going to do that with you guys today. I'm going to have to renegotiate the camera real quick to figure out how to do this, but I think I know how. Here we go, let's see. Is this going to work? Close enough. Okay, evaluation criteria. When I was talking to my kids, I thought this was important, and I started with, we started discussing essentially at first, again, what we had to begin with was passive versus active viewing. And this can go to explain a lot of art in general. Passive viewing, obviously, is something that can be done well, and that is, if done appropriately, is very engaging, can be very entertaining, can be very relaxing. But passive viewing, for the most part, is just mindlessly watching things, which again isn't always bad, but at some point that doesn't create art, that doesn't make something interesting. My daughter and I talked a lot about Steven Universe, something that she's a big fan of. And I had her write down 12 lessons that she learned from Steven Universe. And the interesting thing about these lessons and about what she likes about it is that they're done in a very interesting way, involving metaphor and feeling and dynamic people and characters. And that's active viewing, right? That's the act of active viewing is thinking about what you're seeing and feeling and questioning why it causes you to feel certain ways or to do certain things within the context of whatever it is. And so, again, emphasizing to my daughter that we really want to go for active viewing, because TikTok's great, but it's a jingle. It is it's not art, as it were. Although some jingles and commercials can be art. Whole other story. So we get into the evaluation criteria. So I was a semi-arrogant, know-it-all filmmaker, video maker, artist, whatever I was doing at UT. I was breezing through a lot of my classes because I don't know, for art school you really just have to show up. And since I already had sort of a foothold in making video and painting and whatever else, people thought a lot of the work I was doing was super great and didn't really bother with the hard kind of critiques that I needed, with the exception of my painting class at the time. I made a video once, and an unnamed video art professor was just like, have you ever read this book? We should read that book. And that was my critique. Wasn't the most helpful thing on earth. Certainly I appreciated it, but it didn't really do anything. So by the time we had this assistant professor roll around, whose name was literally Ella Gant, Ella, the first thing she told us was that we were all suffering from ironic dissociation. I believe that was the term that she used. That all of our kind of humor and frankly blatantly like male dumbness about the work we were making stemmed from watching and laughing at people and things. And so I took that to heart, because I thought I was a really good video maker and I wanted to do better. So part of what she taught our class was this evaluation criteria. So again, I'm going to go over that, and I'm going to go like a couple steps further in talking about it. The first thing that she said to consider when you were doing the evaluation criteria is the technical considerations. Technical is really, what you're using. In the case of video class, we were doing video art. So what we were using were digital cameras, or digital film cameras, as it were, mini DV cameras. But this can apply to a lot of things. If you are, if you want to do a large piece about Greek society, your technical aspects should involve something that invokes that, marble, whatever else. So again, the technical is what you're using. And we're going to get a little bit further into this in a second. Second part of that evaluation criteria is the formal. The formal considerations are simply how you're using it. So for example, if we're using video, the formal considerations then would be digital, black and white. It could be film. There's a number of things. Those are the formal considerations. Is it a film noir? Is it a science fiction movie? Is it, whatever aspect of your medium, which I guess we could also put this up here. Those technical aspects, your medium, how are you using that medium then? If you want to do a photorealistic painting of a person, your formal consideration then to do it in cubism probably isn't right, isn't going to match up, right? And finally, the third aspect of it is your conceptual. The conceptual, perfectly put, is why you're using it. So again, I think these three things all kind of tie in together like this. Part of what we were taught, again, was to go across these things and see, to make sure they all are in alignment. And also, the step further I want to take is they don't always have to be in alignment. Part of the interesting way with your concept is to subvert some of these technical and formal considerations that people think of or automatically assume are part of a different genre or a different style for, I don't know, sculpture, let's just say. And here we'll put style also. And here we will put story. So again, making sure all these things are sort of in alignment is also kind of akin to, if you're going to do a drawing, making a long list of things that apply to the kind of narrative that you're doing, to the story you want to tell within that drawing or whatever else, and then picking and choosing to make sure they all sort of work together. The piece of this that I learned from another art professor, the great and powerful Brian Sieveking, and again, determining whether something, because again, part of really what we're talking about is the same passive and active viewing. Is it art with a capital A, or is it art, or is it arts and crafts? Because that's a thing too. But the way to figure this out is to always look to intent. Can't emphasize how important intent is in this whole process, because intent in a sense goes back to your story, but it is not just your story, because again, you can tell a story in so many different ways using these technical and formal aspects, but if your intent is to get at some kind of greater truth about a man versus nature, or the corrupting aspects of government, that's still different sometimes in your story or concept or whatever else. So I feel like in the heart of all this, again, lies your intent. And intent is a tricky thing, right? Intent goes back to that sort of active and passive viewing, and it goes back to answering those questions about art and arts and crafts and whatever else. Intent is an elusive and slippery subject. I think a lot of people don't like talking about it because it is very subjective. But as long as you remember that it is subjective, and to be objective about what you're looking at and what you're doing, and not sometimes considering people's feelings, because again, feelings are good. I love feelings. It's what makes intent and concept and all this stuff have heart and matter. I think one of the big aspects when you're considering intent is whether or not, like, the root word intentional, and whether or not it was supposed to work like that or a certain way. You know, I think a lot of films and a lot of people get a lot of leeway for leaving the door open for people to interject their own meaning, and sometimes that's good. If that was intentional, bravo to you. But I sat through a lot of critiques where people, you know, had a video of them driving over a bridge for an hour and then tried to assign all this meaning to basically the symbolism that wasn't there. If any of you watched, you know, the last season of Project Runway, there was a guy on there, Sergio, who just every challenge or every piece of clothes he made, he tried to assign this intent or meaning. I guess we could also say it's meaning. But again, also relating to story and concept. He had tried, every piece of clothes he made, he tried to assign some meaning to it that really wasn't there. And maybe it was there in his mind, but it was not apparent to the person looking at his work or clothes, right? So it does become tricky when you talk about intent. But we're going to do it anyways, because it's important, right? Intent can be a mix of things, and should be a mix of things, and should be a lot of different things. People are dynamic, feelings are dynamic, experience is dynamic, life is dynamic. You know, things exist on a spectrum and really aren't binary. So while we're going to be saying that things work or they don't work, the things that work understand that spectrum and that full aspect of it. The thing that kills me, that my daughter watches all the time, is someone gets some temper paints and they paint like a really poorly rendered picture of Kobe Bryant on the back of a cell phone case, and we're supposed to go, oh man, that's great art because poor Kobe, and look what she did. I think the thing about intent that I can point out in the best ways is what it isn't, or when it fails is when it isn't the right thing. You could take a photograph someone took of Morgan Freeman. I'm going to switch back now so that we can get to this. You know, you can take a photo you made of Morgan Freeman, or you can take a photograph of Morgan Freeman, and you can do an incredible drawing of that photograph. A hyper realistic drawing that looks exactly like the photo that you were looking at. And unless you know who Morgan Freeman is, and unless you're just there to look at it to appreciate how well they rendered something in graphite, then it's kind of a worthless picture, right? It doesn't say anything, it doesn't do anything. So if your intent, again, was to just demonstrate your skills of copying a photograph with a pencil, awesome. You did great. But that's really, to me, that is crafts, that is arts and crafts. You know, there's a lot of musicians, very talented, very good singers, very wonderful performers, very great technicians, and I think that's part of the taking it back too, is technicians, technical, what you're using, who are fantastic at playing guitar. They could play their asses off 48 hours a day. That's not a real thing, but they could play their ass off all the time. It could sound beautiful, and they don't know the first thing about writing music or creating music or doing anything that, for lack of a better term, comes from the heart, right? And that's the same as some of these people like on TikTok who are very, very good at drawing or very, very good at painting, but again, their paintings or drawings don't say anything. I think that goes into art, that goes into film, that goes into a lot of places. If you could watch, not to just crap on Marvel movies, but if you could watch a Marvel movie for 2.5 hours and leave the theater and not really have to think about it ever again, or pretty much understand everything, or not have to question what any of it was about, how good was it? And again, sometimes your intent, if it's crappy intent, you know, If your intent is to sell tickets or to do a comic book movie, maybe you did really well. But again, I think the intent we're looking for is finding things that are art with a capital A versus people who are very skilled at their craft or people who are somewhere often in between. And that's a tricky subject too. And I call this art with a lowercase a. And sometimes it's a tough Venn diagram because that technical art with a lowercase a and an illustration overlap, but usually the commercial side of art with a lowercase a is this kind of separate thing. I mean, illustration it is a thing in my heart. I love it very much. Whoever drew this little goldfish man did a great illustration. They're very skilled. Their intent is there and whatever else. But is this art with a capital A? And sometimes we get art with a capital A from commercial products, from illustration, from design, from wherever. And you'll see it all over the place. Historically, my favorite, all-time favorite art with a capital A that is commercial were those Spike Lee, Michael Jordan commercials, especially the one with Little Richard as the genie of the lamp. I mean, that thing sold shoes, it did what it was designed to do, it was silly, it was cartoony, but it was more than the sum of its parts. The intent of it was to be this kind of magic little film that used those characters as a canvas rather than just, again, kind of making a goldfish because we need a goldfish product, right? And then we get into art with a capital A. And again, where that gets tricky is you look at someone who's very technically competent at a craft or skill or trade. And that isn't always art with a capital A. And you look at someone who is sometimes making art with a capital A, and they're not always the most technically proficient person. Historically, at any art museum, at any time of day across America, there's always some, I don't know, there's always some dad, there's always some, jackass in an art museum looking at a color form painting, looking at some kind of painting of abstract representation and going, I could do that. I mean, my kid could do that. But you can't, because that dad or whoever that jackass is has not considered the concept of those things and cross-reference them to the technical and formal aspects of what they're doing. Shannon, hello. Sorry I've been ranting. One of the most boring things to me is walking through an art museum and seeing room after room of just rich dude portraits. That is just commissioned portraits of dukes from 500 years ago. Has good technical craft, but they make me tired. And yeah, to your point, Shannon, that is exactly what a lot of that stuff is. In the time before photography, portraits, as they were, no matter how well they were rendered, were not so lifelike representations of really well-rendered people. Caravaggio was maybe the only royal artist who painted pox and disgusting features of royal families in the way that they actually were, instead of giving them that smooth gloss and beauty shine, the smooth skin filter, as it were, of the 1600s or whatever. And I think it's because, as Brian put it, most people were scared of him and were afraid to tell him to do it the other way. But again, art with a capital A can get confusing because, again, the people who are skilled technicians aren't always making art with a capital A, and the people making art with the capital A aren't always the most skilled technicians. If you look at the films of David Lynch, they are art with a capital A. Big art. They're art with the entire letters of the word art in capitals. And it's not always the best cinematography, right? It's maybe not always the best use of lighting. It's not always, in terms of film prowess, the technical accomplishment of a film like The Joker, right? And The Joker is a perfect example of another film, art with lowercase a commercial art form, which has the hallmarks of art with a capital A in its score, in its acting, in the editing, and in the cinematography of the thing. It all functions perfectly. Just, the heavy-handed theme and concept and the story drag it down. So I think it's important when making those distinctions between, again, art with a capital A, art with a lowercase a, arts and crafts, that evaluation criteria of seeing how the technical, formal, and conceptual aspects of a piece work together, intentionally in harmony or sometimes out of harmony, to really flesh out the intent of whatever it is you're viewing. And again, whether that is requiring you to be an active viewer or a passive viewer. So, there we go. That was my TED Talk on the evaluation criteria on passive and active viewing and intent when it comes to evaluating art. That's really all I got today, guys. Coming up in the next couple days, again, I'm going to probably do a long talk about Vulcan Video, rest in peace, my favorite video store in my heart. We're going to go through a box of stuff that my mom gave me that just says on the top, Will's Miscellaneous School Papers. And I think I'm going to discuss, we're going to do another TED Talk on They Might Be Giants, Ween, and Crash Test Dummies. So, let me know what you guys want to hear. If there's something I can talk about, or there's something I can demonstrate or do, or something that would help keep you guys entertained, let me know what it is, and I will throw it out there. And you are absolutely welcome, Shannon. One of the other things that are coming up, I'm going to do some more live things like this with people, because we can do it now. The technology exists. So yeah, next week, when I don't have kids, Shannon, because I just sort of have to do these whenever I can. We'll schedule something and do a dual stream. What else I got? I don't know. Like I said, if there's something else that you guys want to hear or know about, or something I can show you, or something that'd be fun for you guys to watch in a time where we're all stuck inside, trying to stay safe, let me know. I'd be happy to do it. But I think that's it. I think that's all I got for today. Hi, gang. Stay safe, stay inside, support your local businesses, and I'll see you tomorrow.